So the votes have already been cast, and I will tell you in just a moment how they stand on the way into the room. And then we have obviously 3 speakers on each side, and they have 7 minutes each. We start with a for the motion speaker, and then we have an against, and then we have a for, and then we have an against. I will be, or attempt to be, extremely strict with time. This is the hardest bit of my job. Dom is, I should say to everybody here tonight, a trained ninja in stopping speakers from speaking, having done this once before. Scott, who will be raising his hand round about now, will have an iPad with a countdown on it, and he'll be waving that around the room. So they have 7 minutes, they'll get a 1-minute frantic warning, and then they'll be rushed from the stage when they get their 7 minutes. So they get 7 minutes each. Following that, we then move to questions from the floor. So it's your turn to shout out some questions. And I will try my best to kind of gather them together into some kind of coherent order, so we can kind of present them to the speakers individually. But sometimes it doesn't work like that, so we'll just see how that goes. But please, if you have questions as you're going along, scribble them down and remember them for that period of time. Then there is, each side then nominates one of their team to speak for a final closing 2 minutes to sum up everyone's position on their point of view. During that 4 minutes and a little gap in between the 2 sides, we will be frantically running around and retaking the vote. And then we will close by looking at the final vote and seeing if there's been a radical swing one way or the other, or whether you sit stolidly exactly where you started when you came through the door. So I will start by introducing our speakers on the for side. We have Grahm Smith, CEO of Republic since 2005. Used to live in Bath, so that's Grahm in the middle there. We have the excellent Zach Barker, excellent because, as Don mentions, he stepped in about 5 minutes ago. He also works at Republic. He's a volunteer coordinator and customer services representative. And just to my left here, Councillor Sarah Bevan, who is Bain's Liberal Democrat councillor, but also human rights champion for Bain. So we can have a quick round of applause for Over on the other side, against the motion, Jacques Arnold, member of the Council of Constitutional Monarchy Association, former Member of Parliament. Peter Whittle, broadcaster, writer and director of the New Culture Forum think tank, and Ian Roberts, vice chairman of the British Monarchist League, trainee barrister and budding war historian apparently, so a hand for the against. So as the dust settles, as if there could actually be any dust at all with this amount of rain, on the Jubilee street parties, bunting cakes and huge quantities of pims, not to mention 1,000-strong flotilla, now seems like a tremendously good time to focus on what the monarchy means to the UK. If you ask some, and you will hear from them in a minute, you will hear that the monarchy forms a vital backbone to our country and our history, not to mention a source of huge quantities of tourist income. A Guardian ICM poll in May 2012 showed overwhelming support for the monarchy, with 69% saying that Britain would be worse off without them. 47% margin between that and those who would like to see it abolished is at its highest since the same question was asked in 1997. If, however, you ask the other side of the debate, you'll hear instead this is a totally irrelevant, undemocratic institution with a net worth of, I did some research on this today, it's anywhere between 300 million and $1 billion, so who knows, check the internet, they'll tell you lots. And an annual cost to the British taxpayer anywhere between 40 million and 200 million a year. So tonight our topic of debate is great party, but the monarchy is expensive, unaccountable and irrelevant. Britain needs a democratic alternative. Before I ask the fours up to do their talk, let's have a look at how the votes turned out. So on the way in through the door, the fours for the motion, 29, against the motion, 22, and undecided, 15. So the first up on the for side is Grahm Smith.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation to come back to Bath and to speak to you this evening. I do think it's a very interesting project that you've got going on here with this debate, and I do hope it goes very well in the future. As per my introduction, I am a professional Republican, so this is what I do, and I spend my time debating this issue and trying to persuade the likes of you that it's time to call time on the monarchy. I'm not sure it was such a great party, but that's my personal view. But I think the main focus of tonight needs to be on the issue of the monarchy, which is a very serious issue. It is not an extension of entertainment news. It is politics, and politics needs to be dealt with on political terms. Now, we should think about what it is that people have been celebrating recently, and also we should note that it's not most people who have been celebrating recently. A poll 2 days before the Jubilee weekend said that only 33% would be celebrating and over 50% would not. The numbers that were being wildly exaggerated by the BBC were not particularly exceptional for London or for a national event that has had many, many months of lead-in time. So let's not assume that the whole country has been in rapture over the Jubilee. I think most people are fairly indifferent, and simply tell pollsters that at the moment they're not persuaded it's time to get rid of it, and they're happy to stick with it. And that's a very different thing to being a staunch monarchist. There are three very important reasons why we ought to be getting rid of the monarchy. And the first one is, quite frankly, in my opinion, unassailable. It doesn't matter what else is said tonight, there is a very strong, principled argument. We are supposed to be a democratic society. Now, democracy means nothing if we do not accept that we are equal citizens, politically equal in law, equal in political rights, equal in our rights to be represented, to partake in the political process, and so on. And in this country, we simply are not, because you cannot be a little bit equal. You either are or you're not. And there are people in this country who are elevated to positions of power, prestige, status, and privilege simply because of the family they are born into. That is completely wrong in a democratic society. If we go around the world preaching democracy, even going to war in the name of democracy, we ought to be preaching it to the very highest standards in this country. And there should be no compromise on that. I really do believe we should be practicing democracy to the very highest standards. And we can do that, and we don't do that. In practice, as an institution, the monarchy or the royal household simply isn't fit for purpose. It's an institution that is secretive. It has successfully lobbied the last government and this government to have itself completely removed from any freedom of information laws. There's absolutely no way you can know what's going on behind closed doors in Buckingham Palace. All of their communication between Buckingham Palace and public bodies is now off limits to the public. It's obviously very expensive. That's not a motivation for Republicans, but it is a symptom of an unaccountable institution. And of course they do regularly lobby our government and our ministers. We don't know very often whether government decisions are being made because it's in the best interest of the country or because Prince Charles has had a word in the ear of the relevant minister. And of course there are very serious political arguments. This is part of our constitution. It is not, as many people seem to think, it is not simply a little old lady living in a big house that brings in tourist dollars. And it also doesn't bring in tourist dollars. I mean, let's be clear, there is no evidence that if you got rid of the monarchy, you would lose any tourism. But it's not a relevant argument. I mean, we're talking about our politics. You do not surrender your democratic rights simply for the possibility that you might sell a few extra T-shirts or flog a few extra hotel rooms. This is about our democratic rights. And even if it did, which wouldn't cost us money, we ought to be going down this road. It is a very central part of our political system. This is our head of state we're talking about, but we're also talking about the Crown. The Crown is the sovereign power in this country, and that power is exercised without limit, not by the Queen usually, but by our politicians. And our politicians have far too much power, far too few checks and balances. Monarchists often say that the check and the balance is the Queen, but she is not independent of the Prime Minister. She does what she is told by the PM and is not able to act independently. So what we're saying is that we need a democratic alternative, and the alternative is well practiced in other countries. It is capable of giving us an accountable, democratically legitimate head of state who is independent of the Prime Minister and who is capable of acting as not as a head of government, but as a constitutional check and balance, and also as a ceremonial figurehead, someone who is from among us, chosen by us to represent us, and who can really genuinely understand and represent the views and the values of ordinary citizens. And there will be criticism, of course, of the royal household. You cannot separate out the two. The politics, the constitution, it's all bound up together. The biggest problem with the monarchy is the deeply undemocratic nature of our political system is defended by putting on big shows, by putting on, parading the royals and saying, aren't they wonderful, aren't they lovely, then they'll put a foot wrong and so on. That's not mature democratic political debate. I've been told by journalists that their papers consider it a taboo to criticise our head of state. And quite frankly, I think that is the most damning indictment on the monarchy there is, that in this country, free press believe it is a taboo to criticise our head of state. That is not a position that we should be able to tolerate in a democratic society. Every person in public office should be open to scrutiny and criticism. So, as I say, there is a democratic alternative. It is something which we can do. We can change. It's not that complicated. It's not that difficult. It can be done, and I believe it will be done. I believe that history is on our side. Many countries are, in the Commonwealth and elsewhere in Europe, are looking to having debates about the future of their monarchies. In this country, a lot of the support is bound up with the Queen herself, and she, at some point, of course, will come to the end of her reign. And we do need to have a very serious debate about this. This needs to get out of, sort of rather inane discussions about dresses and jubilees and into serious discussions about politics and our democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Graham. Excellent timekeeping. I can't speak, there go too many of those. Timekeeping as well. Next up on the against side, Jacques Arnold.
Ladies and gentlemen, I agree with the first two words of the motion. A great party. We saw 1.5 million of our fellow citizens descending on London to have a really good show, the pageant and all the rest of it. And they did so in a spirit of unity. They came from all parties and none. They came to celebrate their love of our country, and they came to say thank you to a lady who's given us wonderful service over 60 years and shows no sign of giving it up. But I'm not going to dwell on that side of the argument. I'm going to dwell on the rational, constitutional side of the argument. Graham said we're not a democracy. Most certainly we are. For 700 years and more, the towns and counties of this country have been sending their representatives to Westminster. This great city of Bath has been without interruption sending a Member of Parliament to Westminster, previously two, ever since 1265. The purpose of the House of Commons, the House of the Communities, is to represent those communities. Originally it was all a stitch up by the burgesses of places like Bath, and the shires worked out among themselves whose knight of the shire would go. But we've progressed now to universal suffrage and total democracy, right the way through the secret ballot, the days of actually people standing and watching you vote and kicking you out of your job if you voted the wrong way. That's been gone for 200 years. Women have had equality of the vote since the early part of the last century. We are a democracy returning our members of Parliament to argue, to parley about the problems of our country in our Parliament. That's why it is called that. And the other house represented the vested interests, originally the great lords of the landed interest and the lords of the church, and that house needs to be reformed, not elected to compete with our democratic House of Commons, but to represent those vested interests, to have their say on legislation, and if your representatives don't agree, they kick it out, because the House of Commons is our elected chamber, where we debate and discuss and come to our decisions. So what the hell is the Queen doing? What's her role. She is there to be our impartial referee. Because how do other countries who have constitutional presidents, how do they get them? They are clapped out politicians who promptly, by being elected, put off well over half the rest of the country. And you can't treat them as impartial. I ask you in this room, how many people will be happy with President Tony Blair? Or how many people in the north of the country in Scotland would have been happy with a President Margaret Thatcher? The great advantage is we know where our constitutional head of state comes from. They come from 1,000 years of our history. And just like the House of Commons evolved, and the House of Lords to some extent has evolved, and will no doubt be, I hope, finally sensibly sorted out. I'm going to say no doubt, I'm probably totally wrong on that. So has the monarchy evolved, originally from being the fellow who called the shots. It has progressed through the loss of Charles I's head for opposing Parliament, right the way through the whole process of the Hanoverians coming here because of the Protestant succession, meant that that those Hanoverian kings were totally incapable of controlling Parliament, and we had prime ministers for the first time, and on it went. And slowly but steadily, after the First World War, when those great snobbish monarchies in Austria, in Germany and in Russia were overthrown because they used to sneer at our little monarchy that was answerable and was not able to call the shots because of our elected Parliament, that has evolved, become totally British in its approach without, in the last 50 years and more, foreign marriages with princes and princesses, and on it has gone. Now, one of the biggest problems with monarchy is you can end up with a dud. We may have ended up with a dud with Albert Victor, this eldest son of Edward VII. He popped his clock, so the problem didn't arise. The eldest son of George V did present a problem. Now, was he chucked out because he wanted to marry an American twice divorcee? It was a good excuse. He was chucked out because it was quite clear he'd interfere in the political process and would support the then fashionable political cause coming from Europe called fascism. And he wasn't suitable to be our monarch, and the system said we're not having it, and he was disposed of. And onwards we have gone right the way through the whole gamut of getting. So the whole point is politics in a country evolves. The monarchy will be doomed if they do not evolve with us and always respond to the innate needs of our constitutional monarchy and the will of the people. They are serving us extremely well. You would have thought the Queen would have dropped a clangor from time to time. She delegates that, it seems, to the Duke of Edinburgh, and that's another matter. She has done extremely well because she is guided by a number of principles. She's there to preside, to look and listen, and advise her prime ministers. They meet with her weekly, in private, and that is a terrific advantage, Graham, because a prime minister can talk things over with the Queen, and the Queen can exercise her right to warn, suggest, and all the rest of it. The cost was referred to by our chairman as running somewhere up to 200 million. It is nothing like that. It rises to about 35 million, and that is financed by the Crown estate, the hereditary holdings of the Crown, which earn getting on for 300 million a year. So the taxpayer is actually benefiting to the tune of 270 million, quite apart from hotel receipts and all the rest of that. And the other advantage of monarchy is each of the generations is met. So I think we have Elizabeth II on the throne. People more of my generation can see Charles, and for the young we now have the new phenomenon of William, the future King William V. That was my thought.
Thank you very much. Next up on the foreside is Jacques.
Good evening. I come here today as the coordinator for Republic of Bristol. Our group has a varied membership consisting of students and casual workers from a broad range of political backgrounds who are all united by the common belief that our head of state should one day be freely elected. On principle, our group disagrees with the fundamental concepts that underpin the monarchy, first and foremost of which is the concept of hereditary privilege. I speak of privilege in terms of position, not necessarily in terms of wealth in this case. Quite simply, we feel that in a democratic country, the head of state should set an example by earning their position by the ballot and not by birth. We feel that a democratically elected head of state will more accurately reflect our values than the current incumbent. I'm a reader of history in my spare time. History, I believe, should be represented in a balanced and fair way, warts and all. I believe there is a danger with the current culture surrounding our monarchy. The danger is that of the glorification of the past, the refining and distorting of its image. Simply put, I, as my colleagues, challenge the assertion that the monarchy represents the best of our past. Granted, every family has dark chapters in their history, but not many have such help in crafting their image to the world. Let me be clear, our group is not about editing history, royal or otherwise. We are often asked by monarchists what we would do about the names of organisations, road names and palaces that bear titles associated with the royal family, such as the RSPCA and Buckingham Palace. This is a futile argument. If anything, we would encourage people to find out about the history of the royal family and visit their palaces, but we argue that it should represent our past, not our present nor our future. Friends of mine who are ardent monarchists tell me that they support the Queen because they like what she represents. I would argue that in fact she does not really represent much at all. At least not much that is genuine. What we see of her is a carefully constructed image, one that is carefully and constantly attended by her public relations staff. There are few words that she says that actually come from her opinions. Her daily schedules are sculpted with her image of such importance. When do we really see the real Queen Elizabeth II? For someone who it is said is above politics, she takes a page or two out of book of spin, and her relatives are no exception. I would like to think that we are represented better by our country's achievements in art, culture, industry and sport. All of these make a wonderful portrait of a rich and diverse culture. We believe that the Queen, as an office holder, which she undoubtedly is, should be subjected to the same media scrutiny as any politician. When a politician visits a charity, it is portrayed as cynical and self-serving. When the Queen does the same, it is viewed differently. Why is it? As a part of it may well be the grandmotherly image she presents, that does not explain some of the treatment that her relatives receive. We assert that it has become culturally unacceptable to criticise in depth the monarchy as an institution. This is unhealthy for a democratic society. Already, the grooming process in the media has begun with those next in line to the throne. In particular, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, better known as Kate and Wills. They are presented as the perfect archetype of a young married couple. It is constantly suggested that they represent their generation and even pay homage to austerity. The case of austerity was argued in connection with Kate wearing a £1,200 dress twice. It is argued that she is a commoner. Quite simply, I disagree. But I do believe she is the monarchy's PR Trojan horse for gathering support in our generation. The argument is often used that the monarchy represents much needed stability and familiarity in an ever-changing world, subject to changes financially, politically and culturally. The short-term and volatile nature of politics is not new, and the monarchy is not a remedy to it. Nor are they a remedy to the problems that outlive political terms, such as climate change and our national debt. As for the threat of a President Blair, ever so mentioned, you could stop him at the ballot box, if we had our way. But you cannot stop a King Charles. Myself and the group reject the assertion that the expression of our beliefs makes us in some ways unpatriotic. We do not stand for what we believe in because we hate our country, but because we love it and want to improve it for the benefit of all. As I stood next to Tower Bridge to protest at the pageant on the 3rd of June, I did so wearing proudly our flag. I ask our opponents not to question our patriotism. Thank you.
On the against side, Peter Whittle.
Hi. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen. First things first, Jacques. Absolutely, I don't question your patriotism. I think that the one thing about British history, and I say this as a staunch monarchist, we've always had a very strong radical tradition, going right back to Cromwell and the Levellers and all these people. And I think it's absolutely possible to be a great patriot and not be a monarchist. It's actually a bit harder to be a monarchist to not be a patriot if you think about it, but I don't question that at all. What I do question, though, to start with, is this idea that you can't sort of criticise the monarchy. God, I mean, I don't know whether you were around in the 90s, but you couldn't move for criticism of the monarchy. You couldn't move for really ad hominem attacks on virtually every part of the monarchy. Alan Bennett, in his diaries, great diaries, Untold Stories, tells how he says, sometimes I think I'm the only monarchist left in Britain, because he went in to do a BBC show and found that all the researchers and all the producers were all Republican and all the rest of it. And, well, he wasn't the only Republican, but at the time, in the 1990s, you'd be forgiven for thinking that. That has changed, but I would say that the media is actually just really following the public more than the public following the media. I just want to go through this this motion we've got. Great party. Yeah, it was a great party. I would say one thing. People say, oh, it's just an excuse for a party. I don't believe that. 4 million people came into London over that weekend. It was pouring with rain, and I was there amongst them. That isn't just an excuse for a party. They were mostly, actually, amazingly, on the young side. They were between 20 and 50. I mean, I was even surprised. And they obviously wanted to make a point, to celebrate. It was an active thing. It wasn't just, let's get the tables out. Too much trouble was taken for that, for it just to be an excuse. I don't like the kind of condescending attitude that there's been about people who go out and do these things as well. There's a slightly elitist attitude that they are, that they somehow or other, they're suffering from some false consciousness that they're all drones, that they're stupid. You hear this a lot from Republicans. Well, I'm not a drone, no, I don't think I'm stupid, but I was out celebrating, and I don't think that goes for those people too. The monarchy is expensive, unaccountable and irrelevant. Well, first of all, unaccountable and irrelevant. You can't have it both ways. If it's irrelevant, then it doesn't really matter if it's unaccountable, does it? If you think about it, I mean, it's just out there. It doesn't. Who cares really whether it's accountable or not? So let's try and unravel it. Expensive. First of all, I think it's probably more expensive than some other monarchies, more expensive than some presidencies, and less expensive than a lot of presidencies in the world. I think the money thing is a bit of a red herring, and I don't mean to say that in a time when we've got the most terrible hardship that we have at the moment. I don't mean to seem insensitive there. But the fact of the matter is, I think that there is a good argument to be had about having a hereditary head of state or an elected one, but money isn't really the argument to be having. Neither is it tourism, because frankly, if I thought it was all just about tourism, I'd be on their side, because then that would not be worth it. I think that the monarchy is extraordinarily democratic, because the fact of the matter is, if people did not want it, it would not be here. It would wither away so quickly. And the fact is that street parties or not, 75%, 80% of people want Britain to be a monarchy. When it comes to the Queen, then of course most Republicans will also say, yes, we think she's done a good job, respect her. That's one thing. But the actual institution, the vast bulk of people in this country wanted to be us to be a monarchy, and around about between 13 and 17% want a republic. It never really changes, Jubilee or whatever. It's not really changed for about 40 years. Right? To me, what can be a better justification for a system than that the country wants it, and essentially is settled about how they want their head of state to be. And in this case, the majority of people want a monarchy. Continuity, there's no question about it. Extraordinary continuity in a monarchy. And I would say that it's actually becoming not irrelevant, but in a way that people couldn't foresee, more relevant. Because we are fragmenting at the most extraordinary pace in this country, literally with devolution coming up, which will mean that the monarchy is the only thing keeping it together. And I believe in the UK, right? Similarly, on a social level, because of all sorts of changes that have happened, we're fragmenting all over. The monarchy is one of the few ties. We need as many ties as we can get, frankly, at the moment. And by sort of somehow or other, just focusing on the monarchy, it takes all the attention away, doesn't it, from all the other failures that there might be in our education system and all the rest of it. Those are the areas, education and these sort of areas, that is what brings about this kind of class full society we have. That is what brings about the lack of social mobility that we have at the moment, not having a monarchy. Because the fact is, if you take any of the great welfare, social welfare countries of Scandinavia that my friends here, I'm sure, would really admire as being the great sort of socialist countries, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Finland, all monarchies.
1 minute.
Happily monarchies. One, on my last minute, I would just like to make this point. They don't generally talk about what they want. Do you want a powerful president like a President Obama or President Sarkozy? They will say, I think, no. I don't want to put the words into their mouth. They want a ceremonial head. Well, Germany has a ceremonial head of state. Do you know who it is? Who? No, no one. Italy has a ceremonial head of state. Do you know who it is? Oh, one person. Is that's not the president, that's the prime minister or the head of state?
That's the head of state.
Right.
Of the Republic.
Right. But the fact of the matter is, good for you, sir, the fact of the matter is that most people do not know who these heads of states are. And they are elected by electoral councils within chambers. They're not even elected by the population. And they are divisive figures. And this is the case with Italy and with Germany. So make up your mind. If you want to get rid of the monarch, then maybe you should have a powerful president. We'd have then a President Cameron. But you know, what is the point of having a ceremonial president when in fact we have the wonderful system we've got now? Sorry I've gone over. Thank you.
And the last person on the four side, Sarah Bevan.
The June edition of the Cllr magazine asserts on its spine, one can't discuss the Queen, she's not a subject. Well, tonight we are discussing the Queen in part, but in addition, the whole. We all recognise that the current monarch has carried out her duty in an exemplary fashion, has weathered the various family and political storms that rocked the country from time to time, and has herself been a beacon of stability throughout. I wonder, though, whether Her Majesty has ever considered the implications of royalty, not just for us, her subjects, but the commoners, but also for herself and the wider royal family. Has she ever mused, for example, on the fact that 70 million of us live in a meritocracy? Whatever we have, we earn. We are sifted and judged at every step in our efforts to get where we want to in life, including winning a place at sought-after schools and universities. Has she pondered, perhaps, on the fact that discrimination against anyone on grounds of gender, sexuality or faith is a criminal offence? I know that the centuries-old law discriminating against female firstborns is to be scrapped, but that is centuries-old sexual discrimination. I'm aware too that another unacceptable form of discrimination against those of the Catholic faith marrying anyone in line to the throne is also to be abolished. But think what a poor example that has been over the centuries to the subjects, not to mention implying that they too can discriminate on grounds of faith. I think you catch my drift, but I'd like to turn this them and us discussion on its head for a moment. I'm talking about the rights and responsibilities of individuals, and that includes royal individuals. They too suffer from a lack of freedom of choice in life that must shock us almost as much as the discriminatory practices I've just mentioned. They can't choose their path in life. They have no choice but to accept the roles into which they were born. They can't act on a whim and go for a walk alone to think. They can't marry for love in the same way that we can, and must impose those deprivations on anyone they do marry. In short, while we are prisoners by association of the class system, they too are trapped in a gilded cage wearing a leaden crown. A broadsheet newspaper recently even asserted that Her Majesty doesn't sweat. Of course she does. She needs to sweat. She's a human being. Is it any wonder then that some members of the royal family down the ages have crumbled under the weight of that crown? Is it any wonder too that even the Lords Lieutenants of Cumbria, Cheshire and Clackmannanshire announced in the press last month that the honours currently awarded by the monarch, entitled, for example, MBE, Member of the Order of the British Empire, should be renamed to end the echoes of something that A, doesn't exist anymore, and B, was itself predicated on the subjugation of millions of local people and their cultures, represented often on maps as the pink blush of shame. This tradition is not only obviously irrelevant, but perpetuates the notion of a human hierarchy. Britain is thankfully a post-colonial, post-imperial country. Talking of other countries, royal traditions often involve breaking bread with other monarchs who preside over kingdoms rife with long-standing human rights abuses. The most recent such banquet prompting a past Foreign Office minister to remark that one guest would stain the white linen of Windsor Castle with his blooded hands. This country has long been committed to an egalitarian, meritocratic, democratic society. I'm not going to go into the expense or annual £32 million of it. What really concerns me in this motion tonight is the word democratic in its literal, original and essentially humane sense. This is the Oxford Dictionary definition of democratic. A form of society ignoring hereditary class distinctions and tolerating minority views. Monarchy confers sovereignty on an individual without the will of those who are to be ruled. Monarchy therefore denies equality of all individuals. Monarchy excludes those individuals from striving to become head of their own state. Monarchy even excludes its own individuals from religious and other freedoms. Until, not in part, but as a whole, the entrenched discrimination, inequality and segregation on which our monarchy is built disappear entirely from our society, we cannot claim it to be a truly democratic or a truly civilized society.
And finally, from our against side, Ian Roberts.
Good evening all, and thank you for having me here. I stand here, perhaps a rather unusual monarchist. I'm not a conservative, I'm not a Christian, I'm actually from a very left-wing socialist family. I am myself a very devout humanist and secularist, and yet I support monarchy. Pretty much for the same reason that these two gentlemen here support monarchy. I believe that it is an effective system of government. We have a ceremonial head of state and a democratically elected government, a crowned republic. You potentially have the best of two worlds. You may notice I'm holding my passport in my hand. I am not a subject. My passport clearly states, under nationality, I am a British citizen, not a subject. Okay. Do we live in a democratic society? Do we live in a democratic country? Yes, we do. As you've heard from the chair, I'm a trainee lawyer. As a trainee lawyer, you learn about such acts as the 1689 Bill of Rights, the 1701 Act of Settlement. The line of succession was democratically decided by Parliament. The 1689 Bill of Rights removed the royal prerogative from the Crown and gave it to democratically elected, or at least by and large democratically elected MPs in the House of Commons. 1985, the GCHQ case, very famous case, Lord Dick-Lock ruled that the royal prerogative could be, or was, amenable to judicial review. It could be examined, decided if the Crown acted illegally. Prohibition's Del Roy case, forgive my going down to law matters. Back in the early 1600s, long before Cromwell, laid down the principle that written law decided by Parliament, a democratically elected Parliament, holds more sway, has greater power than any law made by royal prerogative. Famous case, Entic versus Carrington, stated that the government, the Crown, can't do anything to any citizen without there being a law permitting it, a law made by Parliament, that is, not by royal prerogative. We have heard here that perhaps the government should be providing us with the right to become our head of state. As I understand it, governments are there to govern, they're there to make and enforce laws, not to give us the opportunity to be head of state. And that's coming from a very left-wing humanist. Someone who has no love, little love for Christianity. We have heard talk about our rights. Monarchy is no impediment to our rights. We have a Human Rights Act. This country wrote the European Convention on Human Rights. It wasn't written in Strasbourg, it was written here. By us, our constitutional monarchy, or a lawyer as such. Monarchy is not an impediment to power. You look at people like Lord Sugar, Lord Prescott, Baron King, Unity. Lord Sugar grew up on a single estate in Hackney. Baron King, a mixed race child, born back in the day when mixed race relationships were a real taboo. Our House of Lords is now largely filled with life peers. People like yourselves, Lord Sugar, Baron King, who have been elevated to Parliament. Those honours are decided by a directly elected government and conferred by the Crown. So, we have democracy, we have the ability to rise into positions of prominence and power. Where is the impediment by monarchy? We have heard from Graham Smith that our monarch simply does as the Prime Minister says. Well, in those republics where it's a Westminster style form of government like us, the presidents are exactly the same. They do as their Prime Ministers tell them. You read the Irish Constitution, you read the German Constitution. The presidents do exactly the same as our monarch. So, forgive my bluntness, that's a lot of touch. Picking up on a point made by a colleague, whereas in some countries there is no democracy at all when it comes to deciding their 1 minute president. Thank you. The US is decided by the Electoral College. Al Gore in 2001 the popular vote, but it was a load of whatever Electoral College people look like, deciding in dusty little backrooms. He said we're going to put George Bush into power. There's no democracy. So, we are a democratic society, yes. We talked about the Church of England, discrimination against Roman Catholics, discrimination against women in the line of succession, that's all done. Prince Charles, which is to be the defender of all faiths, not just the Church of England. He helps the poorest in society through the Prince's Trust. Again, going back to social mobility, when you see this happening in places like the US and other time. Thank you.
So that's it from the speakers until the summing up moment. And it's now down to you lot. So can I throw the questions open to the floor, and if you would aim them at one side or another, or even better, one of the speakers specifically, any questions or points? And the back on that side.
Thank you. I'd like to do something I've never done before. Which is quote from the Daily Mail. I'm sorry. And also the quote from Mr. Peter Hitchens, writing recently in that quarterly newspaper. Speaking as a convinced and unshakable monarchist, I am glad the Jubilee is over. It was awful. The worst moment was the Buckingham Palace concert, where the Queen pledged allegiance to the new culture of talentless celebrity. Any institution that has to suck up to Grace Jones and Paul McCartney to get down with the kids has clearly lost the will to live. The Jubilee has reduced the Queen to the level of national best-loved granny, drained of all moral and political significance, and whose popularity cannot pass to her successors. There is no genuine support for the monarchy. Millions may wave a flag one day and discard it the next. And I think the point that Peter Hitchens is making there, that monarchy is now part of the kind of tackler, hello, okay, celebrity, multimedia generation. It's on a par with the X Factor and all the kind of celebrity trash that goes with all of that kind of stuff. I'm expecting in years to come to see a royal Big Brother with the various extended members of the family in there. And I'm afraid I think that's where the monarchy has got to in terms of popular support in this country. I think the principled support of monarchy, as outlined by a few of our speakers here tonight, is extremely rare amongst the populace. Most people see her as some kind of national celebrity figure on a par with EastEnders and Coronation Street. And therefore I think there is no rooted support for the monarchy in this country. It's on a par with, for instance, the death of Diana, when we saw hysterical and emotional outpourings, of which the country is now, I think, deeply ashamed and embarrassed. And I think in 20 years, 30 years' time, we'll look back on the way that thousands of people waved little flags over the last weekend, and will be embarrassed by that. So,
could I stop you there? Could I ask you whether you have a question?
Well, I'd like to put a question. Do we now think that the monarchy is merely celebrity?
Can I throw that across to the against side first of all, please?
Hello? No. In fact, I think possibly you might have said that a while ago. I think so. That's sort of wishful thinking on your part. I think one of the things with the Queen's particular personal popularity is in fact because it runs counter to that whole thing. It's sort of all, it's about restraint, it's about lack of kind of display of that sort. That is actually what people like about her, the fact she hasn't changed at all. And as for no rooted popularity, I don't quite know how you would be satisfied what you consider rooted. Because for 40 years, since they've even done polling, according to Mori, it has been the most consistent, unchanging amount in favour of Britain being a monarchy. That is heavily rooted. That is not just fashion, you know. So I don't think people will be embarrassed about waving flags, and for that matter, neither should they. Why should I be embarrassed about waving a flag? Why?
A quick point, you obviously were watching the BBC, because the BBC failed to get across the relevance of the pageant and discuss the ships we were looking at. They wanted to interview third-rate celebrities in the saloon talking about cake making or sanitary napkins or whatever they were up to. And secondly, you were complaining about the clapped-out old celebrities dancing with each other outside Buckingham Palace. Well, who organised that? The BBC.
Final quick point.
If I may say, well, look at me. I'm a very, very left-wing secularist humanist who supports the Crown. British Monarchist League membership includes gay people, black people, Asian people, etc. And also, I was actually holidaying in Wales at the Diamond Jubilee, near to my five, where Prince Charles actually owns a house. And I would like you to go down there and see if anyone actually holds the same opinion as you. They're actually held very high regard. And to be quite frank, I stopped listening to Peter Hitchens a long time ago.
I'm just going to throw this across to the to the foresight. If one of you wouldn't mind just picking up the microphone, is monarchy becoming maybe celebrity?
Yeah, I feel slightly queasy agreeing with Peter Hitchens, but on this point I do think he's got a point, and it's not wishful thinking coming from Peter Hitchens. He is a staunch monarchy of the idea, a staunch supporter of the idea of monarchy, and I do think the monarchy is playing a very dangerous game, because they are now becoming an extension of celebrity culture, and celebrity culture is fickle, and everyone will love you one day and they'll hate you the next. So I think that the idea that people are deeply attached to the idea of monarchy, I think that's completely fanciful. The polling, I mean, it is simply that people at the moment just haven't warmed to the idea of changing, because most people haven't thought about it. And this is partly the fault of Republicans for not doing a very good job of campaigning in the past, and that's my job to change that. But it's not. You cannot say that simply because 69% of people said that we'd be worse off without it, that is the same as undying love for the idea of hereditary privilege. I mean, other polls showed huge opposition to the idea of buying a new yacht for the Queen, and there is swift and hostile reaction against that idea. That's not really symptomatic of a nation loving their monarch. And even the cost-free change of the tower housing Big Ben to Queen Elizabeth Tower also was opposed by a majority nationwide and a bigger majority in London. So it's a lot more antipathy, a lot more diverse range of views than simply 70 to 80% loving the Queen and the monarchy. Also, we're seeing polls saying that most people, or majority, want to see William instead of Charles. So that's support for the hereditary principle out the window. So it is a lot more complicated than monarchists like to believe. And quite frankly, I think monarchists need to be fairly careful not to sort of kid themselves that everyone is in love with it, because that support is a lot more shallow than they might want to believe.
Thank you, Grahm.
So without replacement, what would it be lacking, please?
We don't perhaps notice, but the Queen does a hell of a lot of things which would be a terrible waste of time for an executive president. She receives ambassadors, appoints generals, appoints every manner of bumbledom. Parliament is required to be appointed. She does all of those things, which, quite frankly, would be a waste of time for Number 10. Number 10's job is to get on with governing the country, and if we all think it's a load of rubbish and they've been a disaster, we kick them out. I don't suggest my own kicking out of Parliament was because I was so bloody awful, but the reason I ended up getting kicked out of Parliament was because the British people wanted to change the government. And there was only one way to do that, and was vote in MPs who would bring that about. So that shows that the democracy works well, and the Queen just gets on with the job that is expected by foreigners when they look in this country. State visits to and fro. It's all very nice and very wonderful, but we don't want our Prime Minister wasting time on that. We want him to get on with running the budget, schools, hospitals, and all the rest.
Thank you, James. I think just a quick one.
Yeah, just to come back. There is a job to be done for a head of state who is independent of the Prime Minister. It was pointed out, it's been said that the Queen is supposed to be our referee. Well, this is part of the problem. Is that the head of state ought to be the referee, as they are in Ireland. And to answer your point earlier, it's not a load of tosh or whatever word it was you used. The Irish President does not simply do what the Irish Prime Minister asks. The Irish President can say no to an act of Parliament in Ireland going into law if they think it's unconstitutional. That is the job of a referee. The Queen is a pretty poor referee, given the fact that she has to take orders from the captain of one side. That's not the sort of referee you want. You want someone who is actually going to be independent. Usually, as with the Irish President and the Queen, they're ceremonial, and there is a job there to be done. I think that shouldn't be discounted. But there is a serious job of work to be done by the head of state. The only other thing is, I say, don't believe the myth of the hard-working monarch. I mean, these people spend an awful lot of time on holiday in Scotland and in Norfolk, doing an awful lot more hunting and fishing than they do greeting and hand-waving.
Thanks, Grahm. Back to the floor. Chat. Over there, yep.
Hello. My question would be to the for side. I think the likelihood is that if we have a voted head of state, we might end up with a Boris Johnson, or we might end up with a really kind of innocuous, kind of like a Euro MP type person. What's the alternative in your mind?
I'll speak. This argument is not, this is the problem with the monarchist argument, is that it lacks any kind of imagination or ambition. I mean, and this argument that, all we're going to get is a clapped out politicians, quite frankly offensive to the presidents of Ireland and to the British people. I mean, Ireland is a good model to look to. They've got, a history of the last 20 years certainly of some pretty outstanding heads of state who have not only been outstanding in and of themselves, they've been enormously popular. One of whom, in fact, was re-elected unopposed because she was so popular among the electorate. And just the fact of their election was symbolic of changing times in Ireland. The first woman being elected in the mid-90s, Mary McAleese being the first president from Northern Ireland, reflecting changing attitudes in the Troubles there, and was able to actually represent those bridging of those divides. And now we have a new president who was elected last year in a very interesting, quite frankly, inspiring election. And we talk about unity. I mean, the President Michael D. Higgins, in his inauguration, introduced humanist, Muslim, Jewish elements to that alongside traditional Catholic ones. That is a symbol of unity for a modern and progressive Ireland. And that is a very proud and significant moment, I believe, for the Irish people. And that is someone who was elected freely and fairly by the Irish people, from the Irish people. And what do we get? We get told that we have to watch a load of votes going down the river celebrating the fact that our head of state has been on the throne for 60 years. That's not an achievement, that's mathematics. If you're given a job for life at 25, you're still alive at 85, you've had the job for 60 years. So, I think that, quite frankly, Britain is absolutely chock full to the rafters with talented, excellent, exceptional people. I mean, we have a lot of Nobel Prize winners, scientists, inventors, soldiers even, and even politicians, people that can be elected to be our highest representative, who will do us proud, and we can keep on electing them, and also we can get rid of them if we don't like them. And I would say this for Boris Johnson: he was elected and then re-elected. Whether you like him or not, you can't take that away from him. He was chosen freely and fairly by the people of London, and if we want to have him as our head of state, that's entirely down to us. People say, you know, you get President Blair. I've never, in all the years I've been doing this, met a single person who wants President Blair. And in fact, the longest queue of people wanting to come up to me saying, I don't want President Blair, was at the Labour Party conference. So the chances of him winning a free and fair election are pretty remote, so I suspect he'll know that and won't stand in the first place. So let's not do down Britain, and let's not dismiss the democratic ideal because we lack ambition and imagination.
Can I just, sorry, just quickly, Graham, just to bring you back to the question, because I'm sure you spend an awful lot of time thinking about this in the shower. Surely there is somebody in your brain who fits that role. Who is it?
Well, no, because the point is that it's not about the individual person. It's about the free will of the people to choose someone, and we don't know when it's going to be. The most we could ever do is guess who the first president might be. But of course, we're talking about a succession of presidents over time. So, you know, it's not about second guessing who it's going to be. We should have confidence in the people to choose someone and to make an intelligent choice.
Oh, right, done, Boris.
Can I come back?
Sure, yeah.
Some time. I mean, I think, you know, actually one of your members, I think she's a member, Graham, Yasmin Alawat Grahm, on the TV suggested Joanna Lumley. Now, I like Joanna Lumley an awful lot, you know, but frankly, I don't think she could inspire 10,000 street parties, and also for that matter, which I think is far more important, if it's still working, is that the profile of the Queen around the world gives basically Britain almost a disproportionate kind of international profile. Everybody knows Queen Elizabeth. She is the Queen. You know, when people went to see that movie with Helen Mirren, they didn't go thinking it was all about Queen Margrethe of Denmark. They knew that it was basically about Queen Elizabeth II. It is phenomenal in terms of branding Britain. And you only have to actually go outside of Britain, which I'm sure most of us do now, to kind of realise this. Not only do they know the Queen, but they also know Charles, and particularly now William. And it brings Britain right in to the centre of the stage in a way possibly it wouldn't be if we had a Joanna Lumley, or if, for that matter, if we had somebody who I think would be more like someone like a Michael Heseltine.
This is back to funders quickly, because I mean the point is the Queen is famous because she's the Queen of Britain. As you were being rather rude about the presidents of Germany and Italy, but who can name the monarchs of Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Netherlands, and so on? I mean, a lot of people probably wouldn't even know they had monarchs. I mean, the Danish Republican movement, who were visiting recently, have a saying that the Danish monarchy is world famous in Denmark. You know, most people have no idea who they are. So, you know, the Queen of England is famous because she's the Queen of England. Britain is a famous country, if you can put it like that, because of our enormous impact on the world. You know, because of language and culture and empire and all the rest of it. It's not because we don't elect a head of state.
We're in danger of beginning to play a game of who's the most famous top trump, so I'm going to stop that there. This chap here has had his hand up for some time. Yeah.
I was just wondering how we'd go about choosing the new system. Would there be a referendum on it, and would a hereditary monarchy be one of the options?
It's very quick. I mean, you would have a referendum, absolutely, and the option would be: do you want to have a new system, or keep what you've got? And obviously, what we've got is a hereditary monarchy.
Can I just say on that matter of the referendum, we had a referendum on our electoral system. We now have a peculiar referendum, no doubt with multi-questions on this particular point. Isn't it an irony that the one referendum the British people actually want about whether we should stay in the European bureaucracy or not is the one referendum nobody seems to, on that side, to be talking about? Far more relevant.
Yeah. If I could also cut in.
As long as it's not about Europe, yeah.
To Graham, what if you lose that referendum overwhelmingly and people want to keep the monarchy?
Just very quickly,
if we lose the referendum, we dust ourselves off and keep carrying on. We keep campaigning, and that's democracy. We have every right to campaign for what we want, and we will keep fighting until we win it. It's not, you don't, when a government loses an election, they don't just pack their bags and go home. They carry on fighting, and that's every citizen's right to keep on fighting for what they believe.
Any more from the floor? Chap here.
Thank you. I suppose I should first of all correct, you can tell enough around here, the gross misinformation about the presidential system both in Ireland and in Italy. where we have had in Ireland a string of very distinguished presidents, very high quality scholars. First president of the Irish Republic was a Protestant, which was symbolically important, Gaelic scholar, which was also symbolically important. We've had distinguished jurists, we have a distinguished poet now. Some of them were career politicians, some of them weren't. On a number of occasions, that president, purely ceremonial, has told the Prime Minister where to get off. Okay? And on the whole, they have represented our country with distinction, even those who politically I wouldn't have any great time for. The same thing has happened in Italy. Giorgio Napolitano reined in Silvio Berlusconi on more than one occasion, and he's an old communist, clapped out Stalinist hack, but he did the job that the Constitution gave him. The same thing has happened in Germany. To simply claim that you need a queen or a king to do this is just lies. And cretinous lies at that.
Okay, let's throw that at the againsts.
Well, am I supposed to produce a question at some point?
I think that was almost one, but yeah, go on.
Yeah, you're right. We were told that you don't have to have a presidency for people to get into power, and we were told about clapped-out politician Una King, who made it to the Lords after losing her seat, and Lord Sugar, who was never elected to anything. And then we had what was supposed to be the killer blow, President Mayor. And it's always the killer blow, or sometimes President Bevan. It's true. After 1,000 years of monarchy, monarchists believe that either the people of this country are so stupid they would vote for a President Blair, or they believe that after 1,000 years of monarchy, this country can't produce anyone better. Is that really what you believe?
Well, there is a wonderful expression called luck of the Irish, and I've never heard of luck of the Germans.
Only never used by condescending Englishmen.
The last two constitutional presidents in Germany, both of them have been banged to rights and kicked out on grounds of either a scandal that was financial or political. So I think that argument is pretty weak.
Okay, back to the floor. Chap here in the middle, chap.
Just that if the Queen's so popular, if there was an election, she could stand.
Any more from the floor? Surely some more. Yeah, chap here.
Yeah, this is to the pro-monarchist. Two bits of questions. First one is, do you think that under a system where somebody is born special, that undermines the entire thing that everybody is created equal? And do you also think that, like I've studied history as well, and the one flaw in the monarchy is, you talked a lot about the current Queen. You read history, monarchy is full of, you have a strong king, and then under the hereditary principle is replaced by a complete idiot, and then there's a struggle for power. And and I suspect that the number of people in this country who support the monarchy at the moment will drop alarmingly once Charles becomes king.
So let's take that first point. Does someone being born special undermine the notion that everyone is equal?
I think we'll have a look at the United States, shall we, where it says that everybody is born equal in the Constitution. Well, I think you look at it now, you are the very states, you are the very, very rich, very, very poor. The US is a republic. Over here, okay, we've got rich and poor, but it's more near as stark as the so-called land of the free.
I think the point I made, about the, yes, of course, when you put it like that, yes, of course, it's completely incompatible with that idea. I don't know, actually, whether everybody still agrees with that idea of we're being all equal. When I say that, I don't mean we're all equal in terms of, human beings, the way we're born. But essentially, I think that idea of egalitarianism is now seen as maybe being a little bit utopian. But I understand, yes, of course, it does go against it. What I say to that is that human beings are not rational necessarily. We're not rational. One of the great mistakes in the 20th century, in a way, was trying to get people to act rationally under maybe communism or whatever else it was. And I think that that is one of the possible reasons why there is support for systems which do seem obviously irregular, such as a monarchy. There is an irrational element to it. It doesn't seem to make sense in our day and age. But that's because it speaks to, I would say, other things other than just simple elections or what have you. It's about essentially almost sometimes a kind of tribal sentimentalism, it's a sense of history, it's a sense of identity, all of those things. It's very easy to sneer at, but their grip they have is obviously very strong, because I would welcome actually a referendum on monarchy. I'm not frightened of that at all. I suspect actually that probably Republicans would like one less actually. So I'd say bring it on.
I would welcome one. I mean, the wedding and the Jubilee have been great for our membership, so a referendum is fantastic. So, and I would say this is a quality thing. It's not about wealth equality, it's about political equality. That is what it's about. And that's not utopian, that's a legal fact in the US. You are politically equal, everyone is a citizen with the same rights. Now, I would be the first to criticise the US for failings in implementing that equality and making sure it actually means something. But the idea that we should point to the US and say, well, they're getting it wrong, so we shouldn't even try, I just think that's nonsense. We need to be more ambitious than other countries, not just stick with what we've got. And the idea of history and irrationality, this isn't about rational against irrational. People don't go protesting against the monarchy because they have a rational view. They have a heartfelt, passionate view about democracy and about changing this country. And the great thing about history is that it has to be made in order to be celebrated. We have to keep on making it. You can't just say we're going to pick a bit of history from a few hundred years ago and just stick with that forever and ever. Let's make some new history, and then in the future people can celebrate the fact that as a country we peacefully and democratically chose to change the way we do our politics.
Just very quickly back to the very quickly back to
a very interesting practical point. The monarchy is immensely popular at the moment, and your membership has gone up on your side of the argument. You might actually be interested to know the fact that when the royal family ran into some problems over the marriages and over Diana, the membership of the Constitutional Monarchy Association went up by tens of thousands as people rallied around to support the monarchy. So it's quite an interesting two sides of the mirror.
Any more from the floor? Chap there with his hand up to the back.
Question for the board, Cam. Where do you see the best model of what you propose elsewhere in the world, and why is it high?
Someone other than Grahm would like to answer?
My colleagues seem to say. I will.
Go on, Sarah.
Well, why should we base our alternative on what someone else has already got? I mean, do we have to be able to point to, say, a bicycle monarchy and say, oh yeah, that's what I'd like?
I was thinking about the political side of it, not that's a bit trivial. Where is the constitutional model that you would like to see? I mean, does it exist anywhere? And if it does, where is it and why?
Well, I think that the most common model that is supported by Republicans in this country is, if you're going to point to a country and say that's the one closest to what we want, is Ireland. Because it is a parliamentary democracy, which of course came from, obviously came from the same tradition, having been ruled by our parliament. It's a parliamentary democracy with a written constitution that does put limits on the power of our politicians, and it does ensure that the whole of the parliament is democratically accountable and does allow the head of state to be directly elected by the people. But again, it is a British republic that we're arguing for. We're not arguing simply, importing the Irish constitution. We're talking about having a British republic, and it's about building on what we've got, improving what we've got, not sweeping the whole lot aside and having something completely new. So references to the US and France are slightly beyond beside the point, because we're talking about making what we've got democratic rather than sweeping the whole lot aside and starting again.
Thanks, Grahm. Right at the back there, chap in red.
By making the head of state elected, and I'm assuming with a kind of time frame associated with that, do you not then produce like long sight? So everyone in Parliament of England just comes back and is seeking re-election. Would the same not be true of the elected head of state?
It's an interesting point because this was made several times by all three on the against side, is this sense of continuity. Wondering whether anyone from the for side would like to just respond to that.
Well, as I mentioned in my piece, political short-termism is centuries old, and I don't think the monarchy, well, the abolition of the monarchy would necessarily get rid of that, but I believe it's a start. As regards to the, short-termism in politics, I think it's more of a culture change which needs to happen, and in order to do that, I think in many ways we need to kind of get rid of our loathing at the moment of our political system. I mean, all the time when I hear about the idea of presidency, there's negativity about it. It's always, how are they going to steal? How are they going to bill their expenses, etc., etc. It's sad, really. We get this, like, we go off to like the negative part before we think of the positives. I think we should look on the presidency as an opportunity, and not a kind of like, basically a carbon copy of the Prime Minister, and take it from there, and think of it as an opportunity, and not like a dead end.
I would say that the longevity thing is a bit of a red herring, quite frankly, because I mean it doesn't, the idea that the Queen is, has this, wisdom and experience. She clearly didn't have it when she started. She was only 25 years old and didn't have a very, broad outlook on life. The idea that she can sit there and give words of wisdom of any value whatsoever to the ageing Prime Minister Winston Churchill, who not so long ago had actually won a war for us, is just complete nonsense.
I think the point, Grahm, was not about the Queen per se, but about the structure that is the monarchy.
Well, any structure can survive. The US presidency has been around for some time. It's unlikely to be changed anytime soon. But I mean, that any constitutional structure can survive for a very long time, and there's no inherent stability in having one over the other. In fact, it's more. I mean, the reason why there are so few monarchies around is because democratic systems are much more able to adapt to social pressures and political pressures than undemocratic ones, which is why most of them collapsed.
Thank you. Any more? Chap in the middle.
Hi. Would you have a problem with the Speaker of the House of Lords talking in that role? No, the Speaker of the House of Commons.
Is that to both sides?
Well, they seem to be issue with it. I wonder if they do.
To the fours.
There are some people who think that ought to be done, but I mean, I think that the Speaker of the House of Commons has a job to do and should be doing that job. And I think there is a role for having someone who is independent and has a specific job. When they are specific jobs, it's like if you set up an organisation, you're talking about setting up this debate as a company. You have maybe a chair and a chief executive and a board and all the rest of it. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about having a president who has a particular job to do. It's limited to that job, and they get on with it. You have a House of Commons Speaker that does the job, and so on. So keeping them separate, I think, helps. The House of Commons Speaker is a very interesting example, which disproves the argument of many monarchists that you can't have an impartial person who's elected. I mean, the House of Commons Speaker was elected to Parliament under a party banner, very political figure. Once he becomes, or she, as we have previously, becomes a speaker, then they're expected to be impartial. And on the whole, they do that job well, and they function impartially. So no reason why you can't be impartial once you've been elected.
I think the against want a couple of minutes on this.
I think the idea of having John Bercow as our head of state rather proves our point conclusively. The chap is only Speaker of the House of Commons because we have two Labour speakers in succession. The Labour majority then in the House of Commons was concerned to have a speaker that will be favourable towards them until the following one was again a Labour speaker, so they settled for John Bercow, who spent all his time and ambitious enthusiasm in sucking up to the Labour Party because they had a majority, and if he pretended or profess to be very pro-Labour, particularly with a wife like that to help, that's the way he would carry it out. So that is a perfect example of what is wrong with the Republican case. If you've got an elected position, you will have every type of jockeying, and I tell you I've got scars to show it because I've served in the House of Commons. But let's keep the House of Commons as our basis of power elected by the people. Don't mix it up with the head of state, which is a completely different role, and when the minute you have elections, the war horses of politicians and ambitious people charge into the position. I think it's much better the system we've got, that the House of Commons sorts out our democratic will for us. And the point about the other monarchies and the few that are around is the point the monarchy will only survive as long as it has the support of the people of the country it rules over. And those who are pretty authoritarian bit the dust.
Back to the floor. Any more? So this chap here at the front.
I'd just like to say you asked them to the yes. I'd just like to say you talked a lot about evolution and also about various other countries. But aren't you rather doing down our own country when you seem to be defying us evolution when we could go our own way and provide a new twist on republicanism, if you like, not necessarily just following blindly after the experiences of other countries. We could go our own way, do our own things.
Anything you want to pick that up?
Yes, I would just say that the monarchy has evolved. If you think of the Queen Victoria's approach to handling Parliament and doing her duty, if you look at George V, who had to cope with the very great difficulties of being a monarchy when all those powerful ones on the continent were collapsing. Just to compare, if you like, the approach to the Jubilee now and that of the Silver Jubilee 25 years ago, and the priorities and approach, our monarchy evolves, and the day it doesn't evolve will be the day the monarchy will be in danger of falling. It does evolve.
It doesn't. I mean, the evolution of the monarchy. I mean, apart from a couple of 100 years ago, we had some political changes where Parliament pretty much said that they would do what they're told. The only other evolution is their PR. I mean, that is what's changed. I mean, you talk about Queen Victoria, who spent many years refusing to do her duty entirely and just ran off and hid. We then had the King during the First World War, who rather coldly abandoned his own family for the sake of surviving as king, and then changed his name to cover up the his tracks. It's all about PR. The current monarchy, the current monarch, again, it's just about changing the PR. The actual institution hasn't evolved one bit. And if that's all it's being reduced to is a family that just tries to spin its way out of trouble, then quite frankly, I think that's slightly less dignified than monarchies like to believe.
Can I come back on that, please, Ryan?
Yeah.
If it is just about PR, if it is that sort of trashy, if it is that, then you must have really very low opinion of the 75% of people who want a monarchy. You must think that they're stupid, or that they're very easily fooled. I don't think that they are. I think that they see other things in this institution. Don't get too hung up on the PR thing. I mean, the fact is that will only take you so far. And to take the Olympics, it's had the most phenomenal PR and hype. What is it? 10 billion it's costing, something like that, to do the Olympics. The fact is, you can't whip people into a frenzy of celebration or enthusiasm about it if they don't want to be. And I think that this sort of the basis. I know you weren't exactly saying this, Grahm, but underneath it is this underlying thing that the population as a whole must be pretty stupid.
No, that's not what's being said at all.
Yes, it goes through a lot of it. I mean, it goes through a lot of the whole thing. Somehow or other, they can be fooled just by PR. It's interesting. What I find interesting is that when a million people go and march on the anti-Iraq war march, which they did, sincerely, basically it's taken as absolutely sincere motive that they're doing that, and quite right too. But somehow, when 4 million people go into London to celebrate, or when they have street parties, they are undergoing some incredible mass brainwashing.
That's not what's being said at all. That is just not what the case. I mean, I don't know where you get the
Please, one at a time.
don't know where you get the 4 million from. But, you know, a million people going down to London to watch a very slow boat race is not. You know, that is. You know, they wanted to go down and see that, fine. But they, you know, that wasn't. No one suggested they're doing it because they're deluded or brainwashed. But you know, PR works. That's why it's done. So you know, it's not. We're not necessarily saying anything other than the fact that that's all that's been changed. The institution is essentially the same as it was, you know, 60 years ago.
I think we should. Sorry, I think we should move the PR spin discussion to the bar for later because we've got some more questions. Carl.
Yeah, hello, yes, thank you for allowing me to speak. I hesitate to start because I'll be hard to stop, but stop me whenever you want to. I feel that in certain respects, what we're talking about is relatively irrelevant. The main point is thinking more about our future and the fact that the monarchy in many ways has negative, passive aspects to it which just get in the way, and especially of young people. If I was a young unemployed person in London, I'd be extremely angry and thinking about the royalty and all that crap. Frankly, I think it's very sad. I came to this country, I came to Bath, I didn't come to England, and I came to Bath as a city, having tried to build a new city, a car-free city in California, having Pacific Gas Company buy the land next to my 8,000 acres of land for a car-free city to build 5 nuclear power plants. And I then moved to Bath. And after having been here for some time, when the central government said they wanted 11,000 new houses here, I thought, haha, maybe we can have a new town here, a car-free city in Bath. And what did I do? I made the mistake going out to the Duchy of Cornwall for various reasons and bumped into Prince Charles. Now, the Duchy of Cornwall never admitted to me that Prince Charles blocked Newtown. But he did, and they did quietly on the side say, well, yes, you know, we can't say that. We have to think about all the future duchies in the future, this and that. And therefore, we can't let you go forward with something creative.
Can I have a question,
yeah,
please?
The question isn't the monarchy's great weakness that it is a passive aspect to England? Thank you.
Just throw that very quickly across to the against. Is the monarchy a passive influence on our lives?
It depends what you mean passive. If you mean passive, not taking part in policies and the particular housing things you were concerned with, of course they're passive. That's not their job. It's Parliament's job to deal with these issues. You're elected members, and the member of Bath is speaking up on this issue fair and square, and your councillors getting hammered if they come to the wrong conclusion. That's where the democratic angle is. The monarchy is not responsible for taking action because it is not elected. It is elected people who should be taking the action.
If I can just pick up on a point the gentleman said, at the British Monarchist League, we've actually got a very, very strong youth base. We've got a very strong ethnic base. We've got Muslims, Hindus, the lot. So I think your assertion that, you know, once young people, it's all crap, as you said, it's just not the case. There is strong support amongst the youth for monarchy.
We've got about 3 more minutes for questions, so throw them out if you've got them. Chap at the front here has had his hand up for a little bit. Oh, no, all right, you've got the microphone, yeah.
Hello, yes. I picked up from the against team that the Queen is good for Britain because she's well known throughout the world. My question is our acknowledgement that we are a very minor player in world affairs and a country that has got to come to terms with its modest place in the world, is that obscured by the monarchy and its, as you demonstrated to us, exaggerated place in the if you like, the knowledge of people around the world?
Very quick response to that one.
I think it's a wonderful thing if we do punch above our weight. What you're saying is let's sit in a complete morass of negativism and defeatism. I think we must punch our way in every possible manner, and if the Queen helps that, because the monarchy gives her an added boost as our head of state to be known worldwide, I think that's a whopping great plus for Britain.
By that position, you'd associate the past with automatically representing all that our country should be, what it should all continue to be, you take away the hope for the future in that way. You make it retrospective, constantly looking back. I think that's a dangerous way to go.
I agree. I mean, I don't think that we should sort of be too quick to say that we only have a minor role. I mean, I would agree with Jacques that let's punch above our weight and do what we can to influence things. But I do think that as Jacques was saying, is that it gives the wrong impression of Britain. I mean, I speak to a lot of people from overseas, a lot of journalists, and I've travelled a lot. The idea is that we're stuck in the past, that we're with this sort of quaint little country, and that's what they associate themselves with. Now we are, as I mentioned before, we've got loads of inventors and scientists and business people and entrepreneurs, and that ought to be the image that we project to the world. This dynamic, entrepreneurial, inventive, exciting place. Now, of course, we've got our history, we've got our castles, but what really gets people excited is that kind of modern dynamism, and the idea that the Queen somehow helps our international image. I mean, some people suggest that she helps our diplomacy and our business. I mean, it's just completely fanciful. It just doesn't happen. That's not the way the world works. And I'd much rather that we were known around the world for all the great things that the ordinary people of this country do, rather than for this sort of picture postcard idea that we're stuck in feudal times.
Can I come back to this chap at the front, please, with this question? Thank you.
Hi, the guy over there was talking about how the monarchy is a passive aspect of this country. Certainly the case with our current monarch, with Elizabeth, but Prince Charles has gone on the record as saying he's going to actively lobby for the Parliament. He's gone on record as saying this in various papers and things. So why should somebody have that aspect just because of their birthright? I don't really quite understand why somebody should have that access to the government at such a high level just because of where they've been born. So could you answer that, please?
Well, he does have access, just as anybody else has. But what the point you're making is because of his position, you will believe he's very much listened to and has clout. I can tell you from friends in the Labour government, he certainly didn't have clout, and I think the House of Commons would respond extremely badly, in reality, to that going on.
Absolutely.
He certainly puts his view just as anybody else does.
No, not just as anyone else does. I'm sorry, but Prince Charles does not do it the way anyone else does. If I write to a minister and say I think this, that, and the other, then the odds are many months later I get a little note from some lackey saying thank you very much for your opinion. If Prince Charles, people have gone on record, ministers and ministerial advisors have gone on record saying that if Prince Charles wrote to them, they would respond. He would go to the top of the pile, they would listen, they would respond, they would be running off to Clarence House to listen to what he had to say. Someone, I think it was Hazel Blear, has made some reference that, to Poundbury, Prince Charles's rather bizarre village in Cornwall or Devon or wherever it is, a derogatory reference. Very quickly, almost within 24 hours, had a letter from Charles and an invitation, which was not to be refused, to go down and speak at some duchy meeting, which he then did. He has influence. He also has power in this because this was revealed by the Guardian not so long ago. It is in the law of this land that if Parliament wishes to discuss legislation that affects the private, not the public, the private interests of the Queen or Prince Charles, then they have to get those people, the Queen's or Prince Charles's consent before they even discuss it. Now that is an absolute outrage, and it is absolutely true. The government did not deny it; they acknowledged it. They refused to say how often that consent is withheld or used to influence legislation, and because the monarchy is completely outside of the remit of the Freedom of Information Act, there's absolutely no way that we can know whether legislation has been influenced one way or the other by Prince Charles or by the Queen. Now they can say, well, it doesn't happen. They can wish for whatever they like, but we have no way of knowing. And in a democracy, we ought to know, black and white, who did this, who did that, what legislation we've got, and why we've got it. And we have absolutely every right to hold those people to account. If Prince Charles is influencing our policies and our legislation, we need to know about it, we need to be able to stop him, and we cannot.
Can I ask, under what law or statute or whatever you wish, that government ministers may not discuss or take decisions in the manner that you mentioned I served in the House of Commons for 10 years. I was very much at the centre. I saw no evidence of that whatsoever. You're very sure. Well, just tell us on what legal basis that this, which you're alleging, is taking place.
Very quickly, Grahm, please.
I can't cite you the precise act, but the point is, the government. No, sorry. The government admitted this is the case. They said absolutely right. This is correct. They said it. It was in the paper. Quote from the government. This is absolutely correct.
I think it'll have to be arm wrestling at the bar later on. Right. One final question from the floor. If there's anyone else there, are you allowed to ask? I don't know. Yeah, I'm asking. The sound man doesn't have a microphone.
Okay. Sorry, I'm really used to really belting into these things. Rock band tonight. My question is for the against people. Is that it was recently reported that for the Jubilee celebrations, a lot of unemployed people were forced to go up to London and steward for no wages, to a 14-hour day with no access to toilets, not given any food, and not given any accommodation when told to camp on London Bridge. One of you said that we are not subjects in this country. That seems to. What are your views on this quite medieval subjugation? They were told that they didn't do this, they would lose their benefits.
Very quickly, please. The against.
Very quick, you're straying right into the area of politics as an ex-politician, if you'll allow me. The business of camping underneath a bridge was a total cock-up. The whole purpose of this is people who've been unemployed and young people who've never had a job. The biggest problem they have is to get that first step. And if they can get on their CV and the experience they've done this, that or the other, they can get on into the security industry. Those people who came up to do this stewarding free of charge, they were all volunteers, and their purpose was to get some experience under the belt. They were volunteers because they thought it was useful to them in order to have that on the curriculum, which would help them get that first job that they desperately need.
I think we should park this right here.
Very quickly.
Right, we're going to move on. That discussion again can carry on in the bar if it has to. Right, we're going to need the thing back because we need to move over now to the 2 minutes summing up. So can we have the Clint's lectern thing back into the middle, please? So thank you very much for all of that. Thank you very much for your questions. We're now going to have 2 minutes summing up. On the for side is surprisingly going to be Grahm. On the against side, have you nominated a person against people? Have you got a person? Yeah, you're not yet. So over to Grahm for 2 minutes of summing up. Now the votes are going to go round while we're doing this, and we need to do it in 4 minutes basically. So if you could get on with it and do it as quickly as you possibly can. There's a box coming round and make your votes clear. Thank you very much. Over to Grahm from the for side.
Thank you very much. It's been a very interesting debate, and I want to say that this is very important. This is not simply a choice between a clapped-out royal and an elected politician. This is a matter of democracy, and it is an issue of equal citizenship. We are not a fully democratic society. I never said in the beginning that we're not democratic, but we are not fully democratic. The idea, as Jacques said, that we are a total democracy. We have very weak local councils. At a national level, we have a parliament that is less than half of which is elected. We have laws which is quite frankly corrupt. And we have a head of state and a crown which is completely out of reach of the power of the people. So this is a very serious issue. It is also a very serious issue of principle. We are supposed to be equal citizens. We are supposed to be equal politically in our rights. And the institution does fail us on a regular basis. They do interfere, they do lobby, they do waste our money. And whatever the cost is, and it certainly isn't free, we are spending millions of pounds on an institution while we are making people redundant left, right and centre. The Jubilee cost us many, many millions of pounds, despite the PR, which I'm sure some of our friends behind us will not believe.
or will believe, I should say, you know, a gig costs the taxpayer a lot of money. Now, can we really look at people in the eye who are losing their jobs and say, you know, your livelihood is less important than celebrating this one institution? So there are important issues here about democracy, about equality, and about our political system. So, and let's have, as I said before, let's have something which is inspirational and which is ambitious and which is positive. Let's not just say, oh, it's all too difficult, or we'll just get stuck with it, more of the same, or President Blair, or whatever. You know, that is a very negative, very depressing view of the British people. We are an extraordinary country, and we can, from among our 60 million inhabitants, choose on a regular basis someone to represent us as head of state, and we can. It is within our power to have a much, much better, much more democratic political system. Thank you very much.
Back to the against side with Jacques Arnold.
Yes, my job is to sum up the debate we just had before we then move on to vote. So I would just say, as one looks at the whole matter, what are we talking about? We are talking about the will of the British people. The will of the British people for hundreds of years has been expressed through our House of Commons, which has now all the clout. The will of the British people is quite clear at the moment that they wish to continue to have the service of a monarchy, very clearly expressed last week, and on we go. The whole point of this is that our constitution never stands still, it evolves. We've gone from absolute monarchy to constitutional monarchy. We've gone to a House of Commons where you have had every gerrymander to get the members of Parliament returned, rotten boroughs and all the excess, the depriving of women from voting and all the rest. We have evolved to a full representative democracy in this day and age. I believe that the monarchy serves this country extremely well. The day it doesn't, the British people will give it the boot. My personal belief is that generations of British people come up, generations of the royal family come up to serve us, and their job, and they're pretty successful at it, is to be relevant to the age in which they live. And the reaction of young people in particular to William and Catherine rather shows that the future of the monarchy is in good hands and has the support of the people. Thank you.
It's that tense moment, no pressure, Dom, at all. This man used to be in the army, he's never felt anything quite like this.
Never in the army.
Oh, sorry. Just to remind you, when we started off, killing time here. There we go. So, when we started off, we had, I can't actually see the screen, so we started off with 29 on the for side, 22 on the against, and 15 undecided, with a total of 66. Afterwards, we have seen a swing to the for side of 39, for 20 against, and 6 undecided. The motion has it. Thank you very, very much, everybody, for taking part.